I am Carla Neerman, the Executive Director of the Center. Thank you so much for coming. Today what we're doing is kind of a fireside chat. Angie Lukas, who is in charge of exhibits, is going to be interviewing Heather Arenas, artist. And Heather is considered a multidisciplinary artist who lives in Miami City. At the core of her artistic pursuits is an aspiration to bestow beauty and radiance upon the world through her creations. Isn't that lovely? Mm-hmm. We hope you guys leave today feeling creatively inspired and get there and get home and create. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Great.
Hi.
So, how did you get started in art?
I was painting and drawing from the time that I was very, very little. My grandmother on my mother's side was an art teacher, or a school teacher, who had, all kinds of things at home that she used for her students at school. So I had free access to art supplies. And my grandmother on my dad's side would take us kids to paint your own pottery, ceramics, where you go paint it and then they fire it for you. And I always had art supplies around. My parents just made them readily available. And when I was pretty young, probably third grade, my parents sent me to an oil painting class. And I learned from a teacher who did a very traditional style still life. Mm-hmm. And then pretty much that was it. I didn't touch oils again until, I'm just kidding. I didn't start painting oils again until I was about 35. So yeah, it was a long time. So I just drew in between there.
So besides painting, what other interests do you have?
Quite a few. I have 5 acres, so I love to garden and grow my own food as much as I can out there. I'm an amateur mycologist, so I like to identify the mushrooms that grow on our property, and that wasn't even a thing until I moved to Florida. Let me tell you, there are mushrooms everywhere out here, so that's been a lot of fun. I'm a competitive shooter. Basically, I shoot handgun through courses and practical shooting courses where you run and shoot through doors and windows and run in with a gun and unloading several hundred rounds. It is a blast. If you ever want to try that, it is a lot of fun.
Art. So are you self-taught or did you attend a higher education for art?
I did not have any higher education other than ceramics in college. I went to school for medicine. I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon because my parents told me when I was a kid, you can't make a living at art. So, not just my parents, but everybody was saying that. Well, oh, that's a lovely little hobby, but what are you going to do? What are you really going to do with your life? So I had a fascination with the human body. I always have had. Anatomy is just something that is spectacular. I think that the human form is one of the best creations ever made. Everything is orchestrated so well. The way we walk, the way we stand, the way we function. And because I love that and I couldn't be an artist, I said, okay, I'm going to go to medical school and be an orthopedic surgeon because that's the very mechanical side of medicine, right? Well, I got into medical school all the way. I mean, I got my bachelor's degree, got all the way in, and in the first quarter I said, holy cow, this is not for me. I am not type A enough for this. I'm not willing to commit my entire life to medicine. I have a lot of other interests that I want to do, like paint for one of them. I just knew that wasn't the right fit for me, so I got out and then kind of floundered for a while. And after several years, I said, what am I waiting for? I'm about to turn 40. I was like 36 or something like that. And I said, my 40-year birthday was coming up soon. What are you going to do with your life? Get to be an adult eventually. And so I started painting, and I've just since orchestrated my way into doing it full time. I had an IT company with my husband, and I was a programmer for a while. I was an alpaca rancher for a while. I did everything that you could possibly do. I know I may be making this really long, but
okay.
my way of getting to be a professional artist involves all of this. I wouldn't give up any of it because it's what makes me who I am. But the real kicker was when I had the alpaca ranch, I would go to shows and I took drawings and paintings that I had done of my own animals and I put them on the table at the events that I went to, and eventually I started getting commissions for other people's animals for me to paint and draw. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And eventually the commissions far outweighed what I was making off of the alpaca business. So it got rid of all the animals and started doing all that. That alongside the IT business. And then eventually I was cut my hours back with IT down to 8 to 12. And then I'd paint in the afternoon, and it'd be 8 to 10, and I'd paint the rest of the day. And eventually I just got to phase it out. So As far as being self-taught, I wouldn't say I'm self-taught. I have had some mentors, some people that I painted alongside. I got to do figurative groups with people. I did some workshops, and I painted in plein air with a few artists. Particularly, I was just talking about Ken English. He was very influential in my speed with which I paint more than anything, because if you get that gesture down really fast, the whole painting pretty much unfolds from that. And I learned that from him. So yes, no formal education, but definitely not self-taught. I don't think anybody is.
How would you define your style?
I like to call myself a contemporary impressionist, because it's still an impressionist style, even though it's not in the style of like Renoir or the former impressionists. Contemporary because I lean towards very graphical kind of style, along with the impressionism. So I have these strong darks that my goal is to bring you in from across the room based on the structure of my painting from outside. You can see it right away. Especially being someone who sells in galleries, that pays, because if the piece is hanging on the wall like this and somebody's walking by the windows outside the gallery and they see your work, it brings them in. And so that's partly why I do that, but I'd like to have a striking contrast in my work. So there isn't really a definition to me of contemporary impressionism, so I kind of grabbed it. Yeah. Some people have called me a social realist too, because I paint social situations with crowds. So there you go.
Cool. All right, so going to some of your influences. So who have been, besides your instructors, what are whose work has influenced you?
Well, you may have noticed by some of my paintings that John Singer Sargent is a pretty major influence of mine. The people of that era, Anders Zorn, John Singer Sargent, Joaquin Sorolla, they really had a style that I liked and latched onto. But also, I love people like Richard Diebenkorn, who did some wonderful landscapes, and also his figurative work he did in a similar style to his landscapes. Motherwell is one of my major influences. I don't necessarily paint abstract work like that, but I love that contrast, the dark blacks in his work, and just expressive paint use. There's a contemporary, he's actually my same age, Jonas Bergert. He's a German artist, and I came across his work in the Denver Art Museum forever ago. But he does these figurative works that are very imaginative. His color is amazing, and he mixes scale. So he'll have a giant figure in the same piece with a little tiny person standing right next to the giant figure. Realism is not necessarily of concern, but his work is really great. Yeah.
Okay, so when I first was looking at your website and some of your descriptions, you mentioned that you use a Zorn palette.
Yes.
And I would like you to explain what that is.
I don't exclusively use a Zorn palette, but I do lean on it for a lot of my work. So the Zorn palette is essentially white, yellow, red, and black. Anders Zorn used specific reds and yellows, and I can't remember exactly what they are. I want to say it's yellow ochre and I don't know if it was a cadmium red, but regardless, in my palette I use those four colors, and my yellow will usually be a cadmium yellow, sometimes a yellow ochre, but you can mix your own from those four colors, so I don't have to get it right out of the tube that way. And my red is often a alizarin crimson. You can make a really nice pink with that alizarin crimson, so that's probably why I lean towards it. Basically, you can make all your colors out of those four things. You can make what looks like a blue. That's a bad example. This piece right here is those four colors, and it looks like I've used blue, but I didn't. That's gray. So Now the one right next to it, there is blue in that one. And the one right next to that has got Viridian green, so like I said, I'm not tied to that palette, but I like using a limited palette. So when I paint, I'll use only 4 colors no matter what they are, because then it kind of allows me to explore in different ways other than getting caught up in what color to use. And it also breaks you away from a photo reference. So if you're looking at a photo and you try and pick out every color exactly as in that photo, you're going to wind up with a palette of 30 colors on there, and that's just not my style. I would much rather tweak what I see to fit the palette rather than the other direction.
So has that been really effective in allowing you to express yourself using that one palette?
It has, because my tie to the realism in a photo reference is not a thing anymore. So now I have freedom to basically, not only do I have to not have to match the colors, I don't have to match the exact pose, or I don't have to match the exact elements of the photo. So now I take 4 or 5 different photos or things that are made up in my head and put them together to make one of my paintings, instead of trying to exactly replicate,
It's interesting that 4 colors actually opens up the possibilities versus limiting it.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
great. So I've noticed too, you use several different substrates in your paintings. So there's linen, aluminum, wood, dye bond.
Dye bond is aluminum.
Is it aluminum?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do those different surfaces affect your methods, and which do you prefer and why?
Well, the reason that all of that started away from just canvas is I don't like the bounce of canvas. Don't like the give. I wanted a hard substrate. And when I first started really oil painting, I did a lot of plein air painting. And for that first year that I really went into it, I went to every plein air event I could get my hands on just to learn. I just wanted to get out there and paint from life as much as possible. Well, to do that, the plein air box that I was taking fit masonite pieces or birch pieces of wood in the box. So I'd cut 9 by 12 pieces of wood, tons of them. And so that got me really hooked on painting on a very hard surface. So for years, I painted on either birch panels or cradled birch. When you get up bigger than like 16 by 20, you want to have it cradled with the wood on the back so that it doesn't warp. And then I had my first shipping disaster where the shipping company decided they were going to put some sharp object right through the middle of one of the paintings. And I know that people have this happen with canvas a lot of times. I didn't think it would happen with wood, but just pierced right through the painting. And I thought, okay, well, what would be a better option? And my gallery that I've been working with for years suggested using aluminum panel. And I've used it based on some other artists I've seen too, that they recommended it. And basically what it is the same thing that you see street signs made out of. It's aluminum and then polyethylene core and then aluminum on the back. And you can either get it in silver, brushed silver, or white. And a lot of these are white underneath because I'm gonna gesso them anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna let the silver show through. There's one piece in here that the silver shows through because I painted directly on the silver. It was experimental and I had a lot of fun with it. I'll let you figure out which one it is. But anyway, the aluminum is very forgiving too because you can cut it with a razor knife. So I buy them in huge 4-foot by 8-foot sheets and then cut it down to the size of piece that I want to be working in.
So that also kind of leads to your framing. And I heard an interesting story from your husband at the opening.
Oh, okay.
Framing.
What did you say?
That he learned how to.
Yeah.
Gotten really into woodworking now.
Yeah, definitely. When we lived in Colorado before this, and in Colorado there was kind of it's interesting to me that styles of frames varies across the country as to what galleries and people want, right? So on the East Coast, gold frames are king. On the West, in the Midwest, and that black frames are king. And so I kind of had to make a decision because I sell all over the country, what is it that I want to do? And when I started doing these museum pieces, I wanted something that kind of mimicked the frame inside the piece to the frame outside the piece. So regardless of what's inside, I've got gold and black around the piece. So it kind of gives you this picture in a picture in a picture look. And we developed these. You'll see some of them are a little bit different where they don't have the gold lip or whatever, but we call them fire ant frames because they have a red undertone and then black on top, and he sands them so a little bit of the red shows through. And that was just a Florida thing. We're like, oh, there you go. That's a good name. We had never heard of fire ants before moving to Florida. But yes, he learned woodworking just to make my frames for me, because as an artist, you cannot pay retail for frames. It would break the bank. So having him, you know, when I have a list of work, I put it in a spreadsheet and send it to him, even though we work both at home. Okay, I have it written down. So, but yeah, he makes me whatever I need for upcoming shows and things like that.
It also has flexibility of size, right?
Oh,
you
absolutely.
can cut your own aluminum size, then you can also have your own custom size frame without having to like break the
Right, but I did hear from a collector once that he appreciated standard sized paintings. There are a lot of artists who are 15.5 by 21.2 or whatever, but it's not recommended because you want that collector to have the option to put a frame of their own choice on it. And although I like my frames a lot, I do have a lot of collectors who will trade them out for something a little bit more contemporary or something that fits in their house. That's fine. So I try to have standard sizes that are easily accessible.
Awesome. So, do you work from photo? You mentioned, kind of hinted at this a little bit about, do you work from photo references, or do you just really just come up with an image in your head?
It's a combination of things. I start painting several different ways. Some days I will start with a blank canvas and I'll go up there and smear paint on it. I mean, this sounds crazy, but I'll just, you know, give shapes to the canvas and then decide what the story is going to be from there. Other times I will have a photo of a gesture of somebody sitting on a couch at a museum or walking down the street or whatever, and I feel the need to create the piece starting with that figure, and then I will usually put together several photos with other figures that support that main character. And even then, depending on what happens with the paint, I mean, I sound like a loony artist, I know when I say that, but I do kind of let the paint tell me what to do, because if I get a great stroke across and it connects two characters together, and if I didn't have that, then I would have a tangent between them or something like that, then I will change the gesture of the person to make the shape fit the composition better. That's, again, I'm not tied to a photo. If I'm tied to a photo, then those things can't happen organically, you know.
So in 2016, you started the museum series. Right. So what prompted you to start to create this body of work?
So I told you before, I'm a huge John Singer Sargent fan, and there was a John Singer Sargent retrospective at the Met in New York, and I literally got on a plane, flew to New York just to go see that exhibit. I mean, there was nothing more important in my life at the time, right? So I spent that weekend in and out of that museum, and I was taking pictures the first day of people looking at the exhibit, and just, you know, for my own sake, I was taking pictures of what was on the wall, and really was moved by it. But the most interesting thing about it was that everybody was wearing those headsets with the little receivers in their hands so they can listen to the story about each piece. And I never do that when I go to a museum, and I probably should, but I like to look at the people looking at the art, and they all had those on, and there was not a word spoken in this exhibit, and they just were kind of floating around in there. And so I started taking pictures of groups of people looking at the work, and the woman in the yellow dress was just a woman that was there, and she had on this yellow dress with black and white flowers all over it. It wasn't polka dots. And I kind of noticed her, but then when I got home and I was looking at my photos to find something to paint, she showed up in most of the photos. And I thought, well, this is serendipitous. There's something about this.
Right.
And so I started to paint her, and I painted her a couple of times, and I just had this connection to her, and I had to figure out what it was. Because why is she so important, and why do I feel the need to put her into the work? And also, when I did paint her, I had got this amazing response from people when I put the work out. They're like, what is this? What are you doing? This is great. And I thought, well, I must be doing something right, because I'm feeling that, and people who are looking at it are feeling it. So what is it? So I kind of analyzed it a little bit, and I realized that she reminds me of my grandmother. And so I started painting her as if she was, and gave her that symbolism, and now that person is kind of what I build the whole story for the piece around. So, well, I don't know if you want me to go into a specific piece, but the one right behind me, this one is called Paved Roads, and I've actually done it twice, so it's Paved Roads 2. And she's the docent in this one, telling everybody about the work behind her. And the work behind her is Mary Cassatt and Elizabeth Norse. And they are two female artists that really paved the roads for female artists like me to be able to get out there. And so I'm using her as a, what is the word I want to say? As a,
introduction.
yeah, as a way to tell the story that I want to tell. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times I don't even know what the story is going to be when I start a piece. I often start with color and gesture, and then let the story evolve. And it'll come to me, maybe a third of the way into the piece, and I'll be, oh, I know what I'm doing with this now. And then I'll even have a title for the piece. It'll be like, okay, this is the point I want to get across, and then I just paint it towards that point. And that's been a lot of fun.
So that would be Dot, right?
Yes, that is Dot. And my fans on social media named her Dot.
Oh.
I didn't have a name for her. I just was putting her out there, and I had people say, "Where's Dot in this painting?" As soon as I would put one out that didn't have her in it, so that was cool.
Yeah. So how many pieces in the series have you done now?
I think I'm up to about 120. I mean, I thought when I did this, I'll do 5 or 6 of them and see how it goes, and this is going to get old eventually, right? Well, I didn't realize just how freeing it was, because like I said, she's the facilitator to my story. She's the vehicle. That's the word I was trying to think of. She's the vehicle for me to tell whatever it is I want to tell in a piece, and now I kind of look at her as like the blue dog of Rodrigo's paintings, or trying to think of who else has a character like that. Hans Slonim has bunnies that he paints. I mean, she's my icon, Yeah, exactly.
So of those 100, you said about 120, how many of them do you think you've sold?
All of them but what's in this room. So, I mean,
we sold 2 for you, so we're working on it a little bit more. So what have been some effective strategies that you've taken to market and sell your own work?
Well, I am very fortunate to be right brain, left brain. I am not your typical artist in the respect that I have run several businesses, and I really approach it from a business-like perspective. So when I talk to a gallery, or I talk to whatever selling venue or whatever, I'm approaching it as a business relationship, and I don't get my feelings hurt if someone tells me no. So if they say no, it wasn't the right fit, move on, go to something else, and I've had my work in, I want to say 10 or 12 galleries, and over that time several of them have closed. I mean, most of them have closed for whatever reason, the pandemic or the economy, but I find that the ones that I have done best with are the ones that call me up and say, we really like your work, we would like to have you in the gallery, because then they're passionate about it and they sell it. So then we have a relationship that works really well.
Right.
So I have one gallery in Charleston right now, Reinert Fine Art, and I've been with them since 2016 or 17, and we work really well together. They sell nicely for me, and I have some online venues too now, and I've got some other galleries in other parts of the country, and I prefer to have somebody else sell my work. I want to just paint. Now, with that being said, that's ideal, right?
Absolutely.
But, I still market myself. I do magazine ads, and I have a whole marketing program, and I'm actually a fellow with the Professional Artist Institute, which is what I consider like a master's degree course where they help you to market your work better and really get out there and improve your connection with collectors and things like that. So that's been helpful.
Yeah.
This has been a great year because of that, actually.
Yeah, sure. And then the Fine Art Connoisseur magazine, that your work is in 4 different pages.
I know, I was joking with my rep from the magazine that it's the issue of Heather, because everything in there is about me right now, which cracks me up because that was not intentional. I have an ongoing ad with them, which is just a half-page ad every couple of months or whatever. But the editor of the magazine particularly liked what I was doing this month, and so he grabbed onto it and did a show intro and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that. So if any of you do pick up a magazine and you want me to sign it for you, I will do that before we go.
Autographs.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. All right. So what advice would you give artists looking to expand their audience or their sales of their work?
I would say, I actually was just on a conference call with several other artists the other day, and this woman was kind of complaining because her work was not being accepted to things or whatever, and there's a certain amount of truth to be so good that they can't ignore you. So make sure that your quality of work is there, but also when people walk into a gallery or a museum or whatever it is, not even a museum, into a gallery or an exhibit, if you're painting exactly like everybody else, that there's no way that you can stand out that way. Painting from your own heart is the key, I think. Put yourself on the canvas, because that is what's going to sell your work for you if you want to sell. Now, not everyone is cut out to be a professional artist. There's nothing wrong with being a hobby artist. I mean, if you want to paint because it feeds your soul, do that. You don't have to sell it. You don't have to sell everything you create. I tell my daughter this because she comes from, my husband and I are both self-employed. And so from the time that she was born, basically, we have been out to sell,
Right.
And so now she's taken some time in a pottery studio, and I'm like, just make some plates for yourself. You don't have to sell everything you want, everything you make, just have fun with it. So, but if you do want to sell your work, having your own unique voice, I think, is paramount.
Absolutely. So along those lines of sales, can you explain how you decide to price your work?
I started out pricing my work based on who I was painting with. So I kind of looked at, how many gallery, or, if I was in a gallery or not, and the quality of work I was producing. I think everybody can sell work. It's just the dollar amount is, you can do a drawing on a piece of paper and sell it for $50, but you should definitely look at where you are in your career for your prices. So I made a spreadsheet, because that's the right brain, left brain thing of me. And I put in there all of the artists that I knew were in similar places in their career, and I went on their website, scoped out all the prices, put that into the spreadsheet, and extrapolated across and put myself right in the middle. Basically, I just picked prices that were market legitimate. And just recently I had to do a price increase because I had my prices in the same place for years and years and years, but there comes a point when you just have to up it a little bit. But again, I did the spreadsheet, and I looked at what all of the other artists I know in my same arena were doing, and I'm right in the middle. So.
And it's obviously been effective.
It works.
Oh, that's great. So at this point, I want to ask you about some specific paintings.
Okay.
So for instance, there's one right over here. It's the smallest one. Nose for Art. So what's going on in that?
Well, I actually saw that guy at the Dolly Museum, and I just thought it was funny that he had to get that close to it. It reminded me of myself, because I get up there and look at the details on a piece, and someone who saw what I was working on said, that reminds me of me. I put my nose right up in the piece, and that's why I called it that, because he's leaning in as close as he can get to it. And obviously just outside of the little line on the ground that you're not supposed to step past.
Yeah. Okay. So reaching for the carrot, that's another one I like. So this is in the back corner over here with the big balloon.
That one is confusing to a lot of people. If you haven't felt the experience of being an artist and trying to sell your work and competing with a lot of other people, because that's what that is. I'm sitting on my palette. Obviously, that's me. This is a self-portrait. I have my work hanging on the wall. As I was preparing for this show is when I painted that, because all of those pieces are here in this room.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
Sorry.
that's okay. So the carrot represents an award. Down at the bottom, there's a frilly little thing, like that's a balloon that you would receive as an award in a show. And I have a very strong opinion about only painting for awards. And that is a very good way to make yourself very depressed, because there's only going to be a couple of awards given out, and it depends entirely on the organization that you're applying in and who the juror is, and why do that to yourself, you know what I mean? So it feels to me like if I am always reaching for the carrot, and the carrot being like if you're a donkey and there's a carrot hanging in front of you, it motivates you to go forward. There's a certain amount to that, but if you're only painting for that reason, then I think that you're setting yourself up for failure. I think that painting for the voice that you want to get onto the canvas is a better deal. That's why I'm not reaching it. I am this far from it. I'm reaching for it, but it's never going to get there, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that was the point of that one.
That's a great analogy. I've been here 9 years now, and I've seen people that will paint based on who the juror is, right? Or they will paint something and it's not for sale, and then they'll take it around to every other place to get those awards. But then when they put something into one of our open shows and they don't get it, they're like, oh, I just got an award over here. And obviously it can depend on the juror.
Right.
But I've also seen those same people just do something completely out of their normal milieu, whatever, and then win like first place.
Right.
And I remember one particular artist, and she's like, I'm like, this is not for sale. She's like, no, because those are my dogs. She's like, they were looking so cute, and I thought, hey, I want to paint that. And she's like, I just did this one for me, and she got first place.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, which is great. I mean, she got accolades for her style and that kind of thing.
Right.
That's
and
good.
her technique.
But as a professional artist, that's another reason why I kind of pulled back from doing a lot of shows, because when I put one piece into a show, because they don't let you put a whole lot in there, that piece that I will be honest with you, I don't spend a terrible amount of time on my work. There are some artists who spend 3 to 6 months or a year on a painting, and it'll be spectacular, yes. But I'm trying to make a living as an artist. And for me to make a living means I have to produce paintings over the course of a year. And so when you enter a piece in the show, they're not saying, well, you have to have taken this long to do it. You know what I mean? So I'm competing against somebody who has done nothing else other than that painting. And it's just not the same playing field. And the other thing is I have a style that is not the same as every organization, you know, like, yes, I kind of fit in the American Impressionist Society. Yes, I kind of fit into the Oil Painters of America, and kind of, but a lot of those organizations lean more towards realism, and I'm not really necessarily doing quote-unquote realism. So if I hang my hat on getting awards in these organizations, I'm just going to be disappointed. So I'd much rather get the satisfaction out of completing the piece. And I really like the satisfaction out of completing a body of work. These pieces work together, and it's almost like this is a progression of Dot's life throughout these pieces. she's in different places, and there's a few key ones in here that illustrate that. The one over here is actually the most personal piece to me in the show, and that one's called Going the Distance. The story behind this piece is basically the dot in this case represents my grandmother, my mother, and me. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. My mother has Alzheimer's, and I am now caring for my mother. I don't care for her personally, but she's here locally, and she is checking out. Like, she's going out that back door while life just keeps going on. This hustle and bustle of the airport, everything is still going on regardless of what she's doing. And so as I'm painting that piece, I'm thinking about all of the places in my life I've been. I've been the mother who has the kid who's got her head buried in the phone. You know, I've been the person going on a business trip and whatever. And all that kind of doesn't make a difference, you know, when you look at that aspect of my life. So anyway, that's what I'm talking about when I say I'm painting stories. And I painted this piece 3 or 4 times, and I didn't quite get the element that I wanted out of it. I wanted the depth, and I wanted the light coming from the ceiling, but until I got the story, it didn't work. And as soon as I realized what the story was, the piece painted itself. I mean, it just came right out of the brush. So that was key. Having some reason why you're painting the piece really does help.
Well, I know when you delivered stuff, and then that afternoon I was kind of placing, and I felt like I had to make 2 changes on Monday, because it was just like, you know, it is a journey through. You see, oh, there she's there, and then she's really in that one.
And she's not necessarily in every one of these pieces. There's a couple that she's not, but
So like your move.
right.
I didn't see the repetitive dots until I actually hung that one up on the wall.
It's in the box.
So, yeah, so tell me a little bit about that one.
That one, I actually wasn't as focused on the dot piece, on the dot character as much as the kind of melting pot feeling of this one. I was in Union Square, New York City, the same time that I went for the Sargent exhibit, and I was taking pictures of these guys playing chess, and just that, the characters in it were so great, because we have had all of these conflicts, and I mean, it still holds true. No matter, you don't even know when I painted this, but I've got a Muslim character, I've got an Asian character, I've got a black character, and they were just sitting there playing chess together. There was no politics involved. It was just some guys having fun playing chess. And that to me is like, can't we just do that? When you said before, or she said in the introduction that I am about creating beauty, I don't want to paint pieces that have tension or anger or, you know, any kind of noise like that. I would much rather have something that makes you think but leaves you with a positive response. And my Zorn palette, with the focus on yellow in that Zorn palette, yellow to me, I sat down and thought, okay, what do each of these colors mean to me, and why do I want to do this one? And yellow is a happy color. It's just why I want to keep it in there. And my husband identifies me across a room by my laugh. So, like, he can hear me in the grocery store laughing 3 or 4 aisles over. I mean, that's just generally my demeanor, is I am a happy person, and I want to convey that in my pieces too.
I think that's the end of my questions, so.
I covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, so.
Do you do studies for these paintings before?
Sometimes, but often, like I said, I let the paint kind of tell me what I'm gonna do, and the study may happen right on the canvas itself. That's another reason why I like hard surfaces, because I can sand them off. So if I start in a direction that I don't like, and I get a little too far and I'm like, no, this isn't working out, I'll take an Orbital sander and literally sand the paint off and start again. And I might leave some of the darks that are on there and then work from some happy accident that happened in the sanding. So not really, but kind of. This is the answer to that.
Do you have to gesso then over what you sand?
No. You don't want to gesso over top of oil paint, because you can wind up with cracking. So any oil paint on a surface. You either have to get it completely gone or just start painting again on it. And when I sand it, it's really to get the tooth off. It's so that I don't have high ridges of brush marks that I have to disguise. The color to me just kind of leads into what I'm gonna do next. And I've had some really interesting things happen just because I sanded off a painting and started a new one, and I'm like, oh, that's a really cool dark shape I've got going there. What can I make with that, you know? So it's been a lot of fun.
Do you put a certain color down first to cover the canvas or the aluminum before you?
Sometimes I will, I've toned the canvas with blue, I've toned it with yellow, I've toned it with my sketch color, which is, my sketch color is just completely out of being cheap. I mix alizarin crimson and sap green together to make a burnt sienna kind of color. And that's what I sketch on with. I might sketch with charcoal too. So it's never the same thing. It's just what I step up to the canvas. I say canvas, but surface with on any given day, you know. And I'll often start with just a blank white, you know, white gesso surface. And when I sketch it, and it maybe doesn't go exactly right, I'll then smear that sketch color around it. Now I have a toned canvas. So, you know, I mean, it's any given day, it's something different every time, you know.
You using vine charcoal or using paint usually?
Both. It depends on what I mean, I even have used Sharpie. Don't do that. And I will tell you why not to do that. When you go look at the reaching for the carrot, I left it in there on purpose because I thought it was really interesting. I painted directly on the metal with no gesso, and I sketched the piece out with blue Sharpie, and then realized that blue Sharpie comes through paint like you would not believe.
Yeah.
There's no getting rid of it. I mean, no matter how many layers of paint you put on it. So then I kind of just played with it. Like, how can I show you that? And then you can see my drawing in it too, which makes it even more of a piece that's in my studio, because now you're seeing how I sketch in that blue Sharpie. So take a closer look at it and see if you can find it in there, because it's just for fun. It's good.
When you do references and you're taking pictures, when you were sitting in the museum or walking around, do you use your camera, phone camera, or do you bring a camera?
Both. It really depends on how impromptu it is. Like, I went specifically with my camera. The only problem with using the camera is that people pose, and I don't want poses. I don't want anybody smiling at me. I mean, they can smile at me, but I don't want them to know that I'm taking a picture. I had an incident one time. I was in Spain, and there were a couple of construction workers sitting on the side, and it was a great scene, you know. I mean, they had on their reflective vests and everything, and I started taking pictures, and the guy's like doing this to me. And I took another picture, and he got up to come at me, and I said, okay, well, I don't want to do that anymore. I think he probably was thinking I was saying he was lazy or something because he was sitting on a break. But I wasn't saying anything. I'm an artist. I'm just looking at how colors, you know, just looking at how pretty it was. And so now, a lot of times if I do have my regular camera, I learned from Kayla English about taking pictures with your camera down by your side. It's a very stealth way to do it. Especially if you have a viewfinder on your camera that you can turn up so you can look at it like this and snap the shutter without people seeing you. Because it doesn't have to be a perfect scene. It doesn't have to, I'm only looking at the grouping of people with their gestures. I'm not looking at trying to get everything in the frame. So a lot of the people in these pieces came from way back in a photo. Like, that group of people was actually not even what I was originally thinking, and I look at my photos and I'm like, oh, look at those guys, you know, or whatever. They're leaning in a certain way, you know, so. Did that answer the question? But if all I have is my cell phone, yes, I will take pictures with the cell phone and pretend I'm talking on it or something like that.
With the sound of the camera, like the shutter sound.
I turn the shutter sound off, yes.
I can always tell when someone's taking pictures, because all of a sudden you hear like,
Yeah, exactly.
Which is different in a museum, because there's no, you can try to recreate a Sargent piece, but it's public domain.
Right.
But you know, in our galleries, we don't allow people to take pictures because we wanna protect our artists, it's their creation. There has been instances, I don't know if it's ever happened here, but I've heard about it, where people will be like, oh, it's too expensive, and they would just take a picture of it and then go have it printed at Walmart or, you know, whatever,
I've had this happen
and
multiple
then,
times.
and then frame it themselves.
Mhm.
I'm like, but that's stealing.
It is. And there is, the only person, I have several mantras in life, and my main mantra is the only person you can control is yourself. So I can't stop people from doing that. I can only control my reaction to it, and that is, if they want it that badly, that's fine. What they're missing out on is the brushwork and the depth that you see when you see a piece in person, and there's nothing I can do about that. You know.
Well, we try to always educate people too. Like, this is to protect the artist, and most of the time they're like, "Oh, I didn't even think about it that way. I just wanted to show this to somebody, you know, that I was here." And, you know, we've obviously made some exceptions. What questions?
I noticed that in the painting behind you, you've added an element of white line around the figures.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that.
You know, it's because I really like design elements, and I'm trying to get design principles in there. It's getting more into the abstract than it is in the realism, and so I like line particularly. It's just exciting to me because it's like incorporating the sketch back into the piece. When you cover that sketch up with paint, then you don't see it anymore. So now I can show you kind of a sketch with.
Was this one of the later paintings?
This one was done last month.
Yeah. So like 115 or something.
Right, exactly, yeah. And I was trying to be very true to my photo references in the very beginning, but I realized pretty quickly that the ultimate thing that I did when I started them was the painting on the wall was very realistic, and the people I put in front of it was the complete opposite.
Right.
I was going for blurring them together and putting texture and pattern into them and making them be the art in the room and the painting be the realism. And so that's what a lot of the original pieces look like. And now I kind of pushed back and forth on that.
Yeah.
When you're talking about painting on the aluminum, how does it get framed? Do you attach it to a canvas?
No,
You know, and then put the frame on it. How thick is it?
it's 3mm or 6mm thick. It's aluminum with a polyethylene core and then another layer of aluminum. So it's 1/4 inch or, you know, something in that neighborhood. Fairly rigid. The 3mm has a little bit of bounce to it. So some of them, like the cafe piece right there, I actually had that cradled. My husband cradled it for me with wood on the back, wood stretch of art kind of thing, so that it would have the bounce to it and would move.
Yeah.
The 6mm doesn't have any bounce to it, but it gets very heavy when you get big. So it's great for the smaller pieces like the 10x20s and that kind of thing. Ideally, I just bought a whole load of 3mm, but ideally 4mm would be probably the best one to use. And dye bond itself, there's a brand name dye bond that comes in a 4mm. A lot of these are on Illuminate, which is just another brand. And that wasn't available in 4 at the time. So probably that's what I would go for because it won't have that flexibility to it.
Do you use an easel?
Yes, I use 4 or 5 of them actually because I have several things going on at one time, or I have wet paintings I don't want to set on the floor. I've got a Roomba in my studio and I can't put wet paintings on the floor because the vacuum will hit them. So I've got a wall easel with 2 uprights, so I can either put a giant piece on there up to 8 feet and or just put 2 littles on the 2 uprights. And then I've got an old Sorg easel that I've used for years. And this year I just bought myself, or 2023, I bought myself a Hughes easel, which Hughes is here in Port Charlotte. And so the guy came and set it up in my studio for me and everything. He's a great guy. I've wanted one of those easels for 10 or 15 years, and to finally be able to commit to it. And it is all that it's cracked up to. I mean, I love that thing because I can move it up and sideways at any given time when I'm working to get the part that I'm working on right in front of my face.
Right.
So it's really nice.
Sure.
Heather, I noticed in your studio, on some of the images, you have a camera set up, so you're photographing your own art?
Yes.
And cataloging it?
Yes.
And then do you create prints?
I have created some prints of my figurative work. I don't do prints of any of this series. Mainly because this is so personal and it is, each one is a story. I don't necessarily want to flood the market with the same exact piece out there. But I have a specific camera and a specific lens, and I can't tell you what it is right off the top of my head, but I do have a blog post about what I'm using on my website. Same thing goes for the lighting in my studio. I've got a blog post about what lights I chose. And everybody asked me that question, so that's why I wrote a blog about it, because they're very specific CRI rating, and the reason why you want to look for a CRI rating of this. So read that. There's a post about studio wall color and what effect it has on your paintings. My studios, I've had 8 now, building and moving and all that kind of thing, but they always have gray walls because I don't want a reflection from the white paint on the wall, but also I don't want any contrasts or conflicting colors with what I'm working on. That gray is just neutral and it doesn't cause me to have to overthink it. So.
Are you done with this series?
No.
Okay.
I thought I would be. I honestly thought after about 10 or 15 of them, I thought, well, where else can I go with this?
Right.
But I realized that I can do anything I want. I'm the artist. I can do anything. So I am going much more abstract. And there's another influence of mine that he immediately comes to mind with this, and that's Dan McCaw. Dan McCaw does these. He used to do female figures in cafes and much more realistic. And as he's grown as an artist, he's come to mostly do one female figure with like a chair or whatever, but it's his paint application that he changes every time, and it is spectacular. I mean, I just drooled over his work. And I heard him speak one time that he was talking about the purple tree, where we kind of talk kids out of painting purple trees. We talk them into painting green trees.
Right.
And I thought that was such a good way to look at art, is that why are we telling people they have to paint green trees? I mean,
Right.
So now each one of these pieces, I think I try to paint the purple tree, or kind of try to paint the, whatever spots in a different location, or whatever thing I can get what's in my head out.
Yeah, I love this one where it's coming off the dress. The
Oh,
dots
yeah.
are flying off
Right,
the dress.
and I called that infectious because the dots in the dress are kind of infecting the people in the room with, they're influencing, just from a painting can really make a difference of all the people in the room. And so, story time. The one down at the very end is called Heritage Revisited. And that was another one of those that I thought, okay, maybe I'm done with this series, but I used her as a vehicle to tell my Native American heritage in that story. And I'm Shawnee, I'm like a 30-second Shawnee. It's not very much, but it's part of my story, right? Yeah. So the leader of my tribe was Blue Jacket, and he's pictured in the middle of it. Right. I'm a huge Fritz Scholder fan, he's a Native American artist who depicted Native Americans in his paintings, and so I made up a painting of kind of my life as Fritz Scholder would see it. It's an Indian, he's got a bottle of alcohol, it's got the American flag, it's a lot of things going into that one. And then the painting on the left is of the plains of Oklahoma with some teepees in it, made up just because that's where my family's from, is Oklahoma. Uh-huh. The dot character in this one has red feathers instead of dots, and she's got braids that come down the front. You can't see it. I mean, it takes a leap of the imagination, but that's what I was painting when I thought of her. So that represents my grandmother on my father's side, who was the Native American. So again, that's taking her to tell whatever I want to tell. Right. And as long as I have stories, she can be the one that tells them. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'll be doing it for a little while.
Are there any other questions?
I love this one, the light. Can you tell me a bit about the colors that you used to create that incredible light?
That one is a Zorn palette plus phthalo blue. And the reason I did that is that piece in the center is one of my favorite pieces at the Ringling here in Sarasota. And there's this amazing blue color back in the back corner of it, and that's why I thought I needed to incorporate it in there. And so it's more of a blue and orange composition, and that's kind of how I pulled the theme together, is I just kept those two colors as the primary colors in it. The light is kind of a throwback to me painting with Kim English, like I said, is that that was one of his influences, is that we would basically lay down light like super thick paint, you know? And there's something to be said for having your darks be more flat and your lights be thicker and juicier, because you want the lights to reflect light and you want the darks to not reflect the light. So the darks will be watered down a lot of times in my pieces, so that either with Gamsol or something like that, or just not as much oil in them, and I will really lay on the lights, and that makes it pop out.
I think that's similar in this one right here, because you have not only the light of the museum setting, but then within the picture within the picture, you have the light coming in from the window, and how it's, how did you? Yeah.
Same kind of thing. I just lay it on very thick when I'm putting my highlights on. They're like the last thing I do, and you can see that in the woman with the yellow scarf too. If you look at that one really close, I'll paint the whole figure, and the last thing I do is put a highlight on. And keeping your highlights limited will make them pop too. So if you put highlights everywhere, then I have another famous phrase: if everything is special, then nothing is special. So keep your highlights down to a bare minimum, and then that one spot in the painting will be like, oh, you know. And when I say keeping them down, I mean like not pure white. Like the highlights on her knee have a little bit of red in them. The highlights on her hair have a little bit of yellow in them, but there's one or two highlights that are almost pure white, and that's the pops in that.
In that painting, who's the painter that painted the painting in the painting?
Me.
No, I mean the painting.
Yeah, me.
Oh, oh.
That's my daughter, actually.
Oh.
My daughter modeled for me from the time that she was 12. She would model for our whole group of artists, and it is amazing what it did for her self-esteem to have her be a model. But it's just, it made her feel beautiful, and people produced beautiful work of her.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about myself. I mean, there's some famous artists that got to paint her at that time, which is really cool, and it made her blossom. And I have so many paintings of her because she was free model for me.
Is
so that was good.
painting in your permanent collection, or does she have it?
No, I sold it a long time ago, but I just repainted it for this. Yeah. But I do put my own work in a few of them. Well, like the one with the cafe over there, it's kind of a life story on the wall. There's some, people always tell me, oh, I can't even paint a stick figure. So I put some stick figures in there. There's a painting of Santa Claus. There's some, abstract pieces, that kind of thing. And there is dot represented in one piece in there. You can see that there's yellow with dots on it. And that's just to indicate this series. But there's a painting of a Lego guy in there. They're all just my work that I've done over time. So it's kind of a progression of my career coming up to the dot series.
Is that the painting that's on the direct aluminum?
That one is, yes. No, that's not direct aluminum. The carrot one
Okay.
is, you can see it with the lights out, especially because the spots that are not painted
Yeah.
just blow out. And
Well,
the
I
center
saw
of the
some on this.
No.
That's why I'm asking.
No, but it is a little bit brighter, I think.
Yeah.
But the middle of the balloon on that one, you can see the aluminum right in the middle of it. And the point of that was it's a Mylar balloon. I was trying to get it to shine a little bit. So, yeah, exactly. Yes?
The picture of, I think it's Sargent, John Sargent, the woman in the black dress. Was that from a museum in Massachusetts?
She is in Boston right now, I think. That's Madame X. And it was in the Met at the time that I went. That was the big draw for everybody, is Madame X right in the middle of the room. And that's why there's a lot of pieces where she is framed in the architecture of the room, and I carried that through into my work in several different pieces. But the way people kind of flocked to her, and each of them had their little vignettes of 3 or 4 people standing together, and I just, you know, I keep painting it with all these different groups of people looking at her, because it was kind of a focus of my career to learn about John Singer Sargent.
So, Kids and Candy Store. Pull it out there.
So when I was putting pieces together, I came up with the title of the show, Standing Out in the Crowd, for several reasons. I have that idea with my own work that I want my work to stand out so that I don't just look like every other artist. I like painting crowd scenes, but also the kid in the candy store, he is learning to be able to be the one to stand out in crowds. He's gonna be a famous guitar player one day. I actually just ran into this kid in a guitar shop in Denver, and that he sat there and tried all these different guitars out for however long. I just took a photo of him, but I've painted him probably 10 times now. The guitars in the back and the for sale signs and that kind of thing just were more of that texture pattern kind of thing that I've been playing with, is how can I get this repetitive line and structure in there and have it still read and not just be gratuitous lines. That's what the guitars in the back really do for me, and the repetitive sale signs throughout the thing. I don't know if that answers the question. Who asked that? You asked that.
Well, have you kept in touch with that young man?
No, I don't even have a clue who he is. Just some kid. Snapped the picture. Down the side.
Okay.
I took a couple. My daughter and her friend were in the shop looking for guitars, so I just stood around and waited and took pictures of people in the shop.
So when I'm looking at all your paintings, what I tend to see is there's like focal points where it's clear and the rest is kind of
Blurred out.
Your brain puts it together. Yeah, blurred out.
Mhm.
This one, I don't really see a focal point, but it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Right here, yeah, so it works with and without it.
Well, the focal point is created with color in this one, and then
Okay.
light. I'm basically bringing you to my dot character with the contrast and the color, where everything else is muted in the piece. The secondary focal point would be the tension point between the 2 characters that are looking at the piece on the left. See how lightest light and darkest dark will bring your eye directly to it. Sharp lines, difference in brush strokes. There's a lot of ways to get people to look in a certain place, and those are the 2 spots on that one. And I want to move you around the piece, and that's why the red lines in this one kind of drag you all around the characters to help you feel the whole painting. People have said before that I have a sculptural kind of quality to my work, and it's because I am kind of sculpting these characters with line and color.
Comment. I was very happy when I walked in the room and saw the first painting was in a gallery. The white box was my favorite place in life. And as I progressed, I couldn't believe how many paintings you've done. So thank you for bringing these to us.
Sure.
I can see it must be your happy place too.
It is very much my happy place. And there is some, when you step up to a blank canvas, it is kind of daunting to think of what you're going to do next in the same series, but I try to get past that because it's not about this particular series, it's about my whole career. You know, I'm putting out all these different ideas on the canvas, and those aren't going to stop anytime soon. I just have to start, you know.
Thank you.
Yes?
I really like the chess players. Where did you take a picture of that one too?
I did. I took several pictures of people playing chess in Union Square in New York City.
That's what I thought it might be in New York.
New York, it was, I mean, I came home and painted so many paintings from that trip that I could have done a whole New York show in here because, I mean, people looking at flowers on the street. I walked 20 miles that weekend. I went to the Whitney and it happened to be Fashion Week and I had no idea. I'm walking along where photographers are taking pictures of people in their fancy clothes, whatever, and then there's farmers markets, and then, I mean, it was just, I was blown away by how much information there was that I could paint from there. And Spain, I went to Spain and the same kind of thing happened. I came home and I just painted, and a whole Spain series came out. So it's a lot of fun to just shoot everything and then kind of hone it down when I get home. That's how that's worked. Yes.
The large canvas behind you,
Mhm.
is that one of the largest that you've done? And how do you work on a large canvas like that? Do you have a little step stool or?
I have a scaffolding.
Oh, really?
My largest piece to date it was in diptych, and each piece was 48 by 60.
Wow.
And I started out on the floor sketching it, and then had to rig up a system to hold it in place because my two easels on the wall were not quite big enough, but then I wheeled the scaffolding in front of it, and my palette actually cranks up. It's a Home Depot tool cart that I keep the paints in the drawers, and then I put a piece of glass on the top, and it has a crank so that the height of the thing can come up a little bit. So I just raised it up to where I could get to it from standing on the on the scaffolding. And that was a lot of fun. I got a lot of exercise over the time of doing that, going up and down,
Do you teach, or have you ever considered it?
I teach workshops, and I don't teach you to paint like me, I teach you to paint like you. But we were just talking about, I'll probably have another one at the beginning of March. Right now I don't have anything on the schedule, but based on today and the feedback, I'm
Are
gonna
they in
schedule.
person or on Zoom or?
In person right now, and I am working on having online classes. I do have some instruction on Patreon, and it's a membership site. Basically, you can pay $5 or $25, and with the $25 level, you get a critique a month from me. So you basically a Zoom lesson where we look at your painting and talk about what you can do differently or what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
So I strongly recommend that. There's a few videos on there too, solvent filtering. People don't think about what to do with your solvent, and I just talk about how I transitioned from the dirty solvent to clean solvent and keeping it and filtering it out. So, it's goofy videos like that, but it's things that we don't know, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I put videos on Instagram all the time too, on Reels. Like I just did one for the corners that I made for all of these pieces to get them here. I took pool noodles and bent them with a heat gun, and I made for a fun little video. So follow me on Instagram, follow me on Patreon, and if you want to, you can pay for the levels to get more out of that.
Okay, good to know.
I will have some more instruction on my website in a subscription type of situation, but that's going to be probably 6 months before I get that done. So I'm not going to promise any details yet.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for this. It was wonderful.
You're welcome.
It is wonderful.
You're welcome.
It's beautiful.
Thanks. And I am accessible by email. If anybody has any questions after the fact, you feel free to reach out to me too.
Well, thank you, Heather. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, who came and joined us today.
Thanks for coming. It was great.
It was great.
And here I thought one or two.